Hi guys, it's Brent from Black Crow Gaming. I'm here this week to talk about why deployment is so important for Grey Knights. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Terraform, Glasshammer Gaming, and Trident Futureworks, as well as our new one, Gambit Gaming, for all your clothing accessories and cool stuff. So, as a Grey Knight player, I often get told that deployment is easy for me because I'm just going to pick the models up and move them around the board anyway. I get told Grey Knights are really forgiving. I get told lots of things. And then what ends up happening is you end up having a really bad go first win rate as opposed to your go second win rate because you're relying on your army rule, which only really you sort of lose a turn of when you go first. So one thing that's really important is to have a plan for going first. There's a lot of things you can't control in this game. Your deployment is one thing you have complete control over, and if you're going to tournaments, you will have knowledge of the terrain beforehand. Now, okay, it might change, and it probably will change depending on your army, but I'm going to try and go through what we're trying to achieve with our deployment, and also some tips and tricks that if you're at a middle level like me might help you. I'm not a top player. I don't win tournaments. I like to think I do okay. I've got an okay win rate. I play some very good players that do well at tournaments regularly. So listen to me or don't. I'm okay. I'm pretty. I think these are helpful for us middle of the pack players. Okay, so the most important thing to do as Grey Knights is prepare to go first. If you have a plan for the first turn, that means that you're likely to be able to set the tempo and you're not going to be left hanging because you don't have your army rule. And so when we think about going first, what do we want to achieve? What do we want to achieve with our deployment? Now, the first thing is not getting shot off the board or charged turn one. That's the most important thing for deploying. So if you're playing like Emperor's Children or Tau, you're going to be deploying very differently to the examples I'm going to be showing you in a minute. The next thing is if you are going first, you need to be able to project a threat. If your opponent gets board control, your uppy downy won't do anything. They'll be able to screen you out. You're not going to be scoring your secondaries as well as you want to be and as you rely on effectively, because Grey Knights, it's very rare you will table your opponent. Normally you score enough points to win and get tabled in doing so. So really you can't let your opponent have board control. It really stops your ability to score. Um, Another thing we want to be able to do with our deployment is score some secondaries. we were we want to be able to, not all of them. There's some like behind you won't be able to get. Obviously, tempting target is a maybe, but if you can ensure you'll get area denial, cleanse, sabotage, things like this, the basic ones. If you know there's nothing your opponent can do to score from you to score about 5, 6, 7 objectives, that's perfect. You're probably going to be able to burn the other secondary for CP, and it'll put you in a position where going into your turn 2, you'll have 4 or 5 CP, you'll be in a good board position, and you'll be able to attack your opponent. That's how you win if you go first. So I know a lot of people on Warpbane, and I too have been playing much more Warpbane recently, and I've really enjoyed the rerolls. It's very consistent damage, and I yeah, just really consistent damage, and it's got a few little bits of tech, but I'm still on Brotherhood Strike. I think the 6-inch deep strike is perfect for like a 40 mil base. I really like um I think the strats are better in Brotherhood. Obviously the army rule is a lot weaker and the enhancements are okay, they're fine. The best one is obviously I can pick up 5 units a turn in Brotherhood, which is always really useful. So this is my list at the moment. Crow and 10 Purifiers, 3 Librarians by themselves, 2 Grandmasters in Dread Knight armor, a Strike Squad for sticky objectives, 3 Intercept Squads, and 2 NDKs. Not the most units in the world, but I think with the Librarians you have enough like little trading pieces for it to work, and it's been going quite well for me. Okay, so I play UKTC mostly, a little bit of GW, but mostly UKTC. So what I'm going to go over is three UKTC maps, the ones that are free at the moment. They've just changed so that they have a 5-inch like square, like the heavy terrain, and it just blocks line of sight. For a lot of people, this really hurts shooting armies. Obviously we're a combat army, but I feel like our shooting is actually better now because Dread Knights are definitely good at getting angles from places that people can't screen. So we still have a lot of play on the heavier terrain. We're still okay. It's just mostly it's people putting a Vindicator in reserve, not being able to just bring it on and shoot down the length of the board. That's what's changed. So the first one at deployment I'm going to go over is Search and Destroy. Now this has two different games that are played on it over UKTC, over a GT. One is Hidden Supplies and the other is Take and Hold. Both very similar. You need to hold at least one objective in no man's land in Hidden Supplies to score secondaries. So securing your expansion is really important, especially if you go first, being in a position where you can start scoring primary immediately. If you don't, you're probably not gonna last the game. They'll probably be able to dominate you in primary regards anyway. So one thing I like to do is set up units to attack this expansion. I think this is the most natural expansion of ours. Obviously the two in the middle are very open, and the one on the far right is attackable by the enemy very easily. So what I was doing was I was sending a single intercept group, or I was scouting a unit of strikes up there and then moving on to the objective, and I wasn't supporting them well enough, and my opponent could either just move a couple of units on, or they could actually charge me, because it's only about 19 inches from their deployment to the small L in the top corner. So if they've got 12-inch movement like jump packs or cavalry, or they have advance and charge, they can get onto that objective and they can charge you. And 5 Grey Knights, even though they're 622, don't kill, especially if you're not in Wartbane, as much as you'd want them to. So I found that I wasn't scoring the primary turn one. They were just sending a unit over there to contest and stop me from moving away, and it was really slowing down how I accrued points. What I decided to do was double down and on interceptors and send 2 units over there. And 2 units is almost as good as is almost twice as good. But what it did was it gave me a heroic intervention threat. If my opponent wants to go over there, they've now got to deal with something that can deal with 30 622 attacks, and a unit of Thunderwolf cavalry or a JPI unit isn't going to cut it. And if anything, I'll be in a better position in my turn because I'll kill the unit that's come over there, I'll hold the primary, and then I'll have 2 fast unit that's able to push, into their deployment zone. Another thing I like to do is I like to have a Grandmaster there, because if he advances, he can, on a good roll, get behind this small L shape in the top left hand corner. He's quite safe. He doesn't offer the heroic intervention threat as much as another unit of interceptors does because of his base. Your opponent will just stay an inch away from the wall and you'll have to go all the way around. However, they might make a mistake, or they might roll really highly and have to come through, like around your opponents into the L shape, and then you can heroic. So it's just a different threat. He's not really doing a lot otherwise, and I found just having him support a little bit, even though I plan to uppy downy him as like a group of 4 Dread Knights. I like to ping them around the board as a little fortress of Dread Knights to take out threats. Him being in that position turn 1 really helped my primary game improve. Now, on this board, if you deploy your strikes in the Mega L, as I'll call it, then what you can actually do is you can scout onto both objectives turn 1, as you can see in the PowerPoint. Now, because strikes sticky the objective at the end of the command phase, and control of objectives is now checked at the end of every phase, this means you can sticky things turn 1. and it allows you, if your opponent might have screened, they might have units in their big mega L. However, if they don't, if they are trying to, if they don't have infiltrators, or they've put their infiltrators in other positions, this is a really good way of making your opponent come out, because what you can do if you're going first is you can move to this safe position, and you already have a sticky objective in no man's land, and they'll have to trade a unit for nothing to stop you from scoring primary. Now, you can do this on either of the search and destroy maps. If you are running more strike squads, obviously you can scout onto both of them. You can scout onto both of them with one, but then you wouldn't be able to sticky your home objective. And I think that's, it's not essential, but it feels like it's a good idea to sticky your home objective. Okay, so from there, the only other things I really mind about is scoring secondaries. And I don't like giving up my strikes turn one. I think having high OC in the mid game is really important. So I like to have two of my librarians sat so they can move onto either of these two objectives. It is 5 inches away, so they can move 5 inches and get onto these objectives to either do a cleanse or do area denial. They can shoot if your opponent's got a lone ops lieutenant or something of that kin in the middle. They can move so they're like 9.5 inches away from it, and they're good enough to shoot one of those units to death. So there, it's really important. The only other sort of deployment that I worry about on the search and destroy maps is I like having another unit of interceptors and a dread knight at the bottom of this mega L below the right hand librarian, and it's more so that I can project a threat onto the two right hand no man's land objectives. If you don't project that threat, your opponent won't respect you, and they'll just try and bum rush you around the outside. Okay, so that's search and destroy. The next one, we're talking about this one. It's not Dawn of War. I can't remember what it's called. It's corners. So this is a much harder. It's a much better map now that we play on heavy terrain UKTC. Before, it was incredibly open. You were really vulnerable to Alpha Strike shooting armies like Tau. Now there are some really good safe spots. So we're going to, either of these two objectives could be your expansion. It depends who you play and how they deploy. In general, you want to be in a position where you can hold your expansion turn one without them like wanting to challenge it. You want them to have to work really hard to take your expansion turn one. And there's different ways you can do that on either objective. So for me, the natural expansion is actually the top objective. I think, especially with the 5-inch square at the top, it's harder to be shot at, and you're safer deploying in that medium-sized L terrain at the start of the game. As you can see, there's like, I put some red lines on the map, and you can actually fit 5 interceptors and a librarian into that space. They're not getting shot turn one, and it's a nice safe space to be. They can also attack that objective turn one. There's no scouting. I think you could potentially swap this with a unit of strikes, scout up into this L shape, and then have a unit do that turn one. But I only play one unit of strikes normally, so yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Another thing with the heavy maps is if your opponent can't move into the space above the small L at the top of the board, then you actually have a lot of space that can't be shot turn one. You have enough space to deploy a Dread Knight there. And Dread Knights don't, because they're sort of janky shape, they don't want to be pivoting around terrain, and they can effectively assist you in locking down and getting a good hold on that expansion objective. A really, really nice thing to do is, so I deploy like this, sorry, because it gives me options. And my play style, I love having options in the game depending on who I'm playing, depending on what my secondaries are. It's a good thing to have different options. So if I go first, I can either throw my librarian. This is about a 5 or 6 inch advance to get behind this red line, so he can't be shot at. It means your opponent has to come into the space above the librarian to shoot at him, and if he does that, then obviously you can attack him um, either with Dread Knights if you uppy downy them into the space to the top left corner of the board, or you can attack him with the interceptors that are in the medium L shape. Alternatively, if you're playing a combat based army, then this librarian that it is on the objective, he can be just touching it, just clipping it as close as he can to the medium size L, and he's actually in heroic range of the units that are in the medium L. So if they, it's quite a long charge, so they've got to be fast to do this, and then they've got to be able to defeat 2 units. And it's really asking your opponent more than one question at a time. They've got to get there, they've got to kill him, they've got to deal with the heroic, and then they've got to hold the objective. Like, that's how I think about scoring primary, is asking your opponent questions, and as many questions as possible. Other variations of this is, if you want to score like a cleanse, then you can move your strikes out, your interceptors out 12 inches. And I feel like the best way is either to go all or nothing, or all or 1 or 2. If they're a shooting army and they can't pick up your unit in one activation, then this effectively defends your asset, your squad. Because what you do is, if they commit 1 unit, then you can kill 1 or 2 interceptors at the back, and then you still hold the point, you're still there, awesome. If they commit lots of units, then you kill the interceptors from the front, from the objective. Okay, you lose primary, but then they've committed a lot of units to effectively only killing 1 or 2 interceptors, and then you can hopefully push forward and take out those units. If they can kill your unit in one activation, then you decide to go all the way across so that they can't be shot at from the bottom of the board. You can support them with a Dread Knight or the Librarian. The Dread Knight, really, if they've got the shooting where they can kill a unit of interceptors, then you might decide that you don't want to try and challenge this objective. You might decide that they'll just kill your interceptors off and you have to wait till the next turn. But I feel like this gives you lots of options to play around with. Okay, the middle is quite simple. I feel like there's not a lot of different things you can do, like because you've effectively got the 2 mega L's pushed right up against each other. You need to stage in a way that blocks your opponent, especially if you're fighting combat armies, from just rolling over you. So scout up or stick your home objective and just sit in this L shape. Now, one thing to note with this deployment is I like to have a librarian basically supporting everywhere, because it's just so easy to throw them out, shoot relatively hard, or just like put 1 OC on the objective. From this point, your librarian, so I like to also try and deny my opponent primary. If you want to be within 6 inches of the centre to deny their area denial, you have to be within 1 inch of the wall. I don't mind doing this with a single librarian, because your opponent can't shoot them because they're behind the wall. If they decide to go all in to kill a librarian, normally they'll be trading down. So I like to leave him hanging as a little hanging pawn and try and get my opponent to have a little nibble. And lastly, the bottom objective. There's lots of good ways of attacking this. If your opponent can shoot, if they have units that want to be able to shoot you, then you'll have to deploy behind these red lines. And as you can see, you've got 2 little safe spaces, one behind the medium L and the mega L, and the other one at the very bottom of the screen. Now, this is enough to fit 5 interceptors in, which previously you couldn't do. It used to be really hard to get any units on that objective turn 1, and there aren't many armies that have the speed to get to shoot these interceptors turn 1. If they do, as once again, Tau, maybe some form of Space Marines with advance and shoot, looking at you Gladius, then maybe think about deploying them more conservatively. But I really like being able to push turn one and have these guys an inch away from the wall, but on the objective, and then having them supported by a Dread Knight, so it's hard for your opponent to come around and shoot them. But also, if they charge them, you've got the heroic threat. You don't have a ton of OC unless you're doing this with strikes. However, if your opponent just wants to out OC you, effectively you've staged a fast unit in the midboard and you can hit them next turn. There's a trade-off with every game. Alternatively, if you decide you don't want to be on the objective because your opponent has the ability to hit you, if maybe they've staged some scouts in the Mega L, then you can just support the center with this Dread Knight, or you can just move the strikes up and sit in that little gap there. Now, we only have one game on this in UKTC, and it's the first one. And the first one for me is always the most important game of the weekend. You've gone in with mindset, you've paid to be there, and it's Terraform. It's an action-heavy game. I really enjoy this. This is another one of the maps where if you have scout and your opponent hasn't screened the middle properly, you can sticky to objectives turn one. It's just a really nice thing to be able to do. It lets you ask your opponent the question like, "Oh, do you have a unit that can trade for free?" Especially if they've got cheap units that can trade for free that they want to trade, then you can use interceptors to shoot them and then jump back into a terrain. So that's why stickying a no man's land objective turn one is phenomenal. With the terrain, I have always struggled with attacking the far left objective. Like, even if they have units on there and terraforming them, I think for Grey Knights, sometimes you might have to let your opponent hold it for a few turns. If that's the case, I like to prepare a rapid ingress to try and take that objective. But I don't feel like there's a lot of great options. So I like to leave a unit there to project a threat onto the objective, so they have to commit to it. But in general, I would leave the left-hand objective alone for a turn or two. The right-hand objective, once again, 2 units is better than 1. It's more than twice as good as 1. Excellent. Being able to sit 1 unit in the little hollow on the right-hand objective and then 1 in the small L so that it's hard to charge them. If they come round and they do charge you, they have to go the long way round, and then you've got a unit to heroic to back you up. Make your opponent's life as difficult as possible. Not in a nasty way. You could be a good opponent. But try and make them answer questions. And once again, with librarians, you can sit 6 inches from the middle here and be an inch away from the wall. I like to have one sort of on the right hand side, because if your opponent does have the speed to come around the big L through the terrain, then effectively all he's charging is an 80-point unit. You're probably going to have your Grand Masters in that space to heroic as well. But there's not a lot of good play. Like, this is a difficult map to deploy on. I like to focus on securing the right hand objective, terraforming it early, and then asking my opponent questions. If you go second, it's a different kettle of fish entirely. What you can do if you go second and they've just put a useless unit on the middle is you send out your interceptors into the gap between the left hand objective and the Mega L. You shoot their Stormbolters and then you hide, or you just 6-inch deep strike. There's lots of options going second with Grey Knights, so many. It's more difficult deciding what you're going to do turn one. I really hope this has helped you. I've only been playing Grey Knights a couple of months, but I've had about 30 games. I've really enjoyed them. They're much more difficult than people think they are. Everyone seems to think that they're super easy and forgiving to play. However, I find getting the most out of them and they're currently sat at about 51% win rate. Taking them to the next level seems really difficult. It feels like there's some great people to watch and learn from online who aren't me. So I really like watching Ed Watts at 6++. So hopefully all this helps you on your Grey Knight journey. Thank you and good luck.